In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, 3 brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan, Frye, Chad Robinson, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm Russell Guest, your host, and joining me today is your other host and my good friend from Spokane, Washington, Bryan Frye. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning and or afternoon, depending on where you are listening from.
How are you doing, man?
Oh, pretty well, man. Just excited to do this movie. This is one of my favorites.
I am also excited because we have friend of the show. We have Andrew Newmann from Long Beach, California. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing fantastic. First off, I'm pretty sure the weather here is better than the weather that it is for either of you two. And secondly, like Frye said, this is one of my top 5 movies of all time. So I'm super excited for this podcast.
Fantastic. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we got to break the ice here. We got to get people to know Andrew at a deep personal level. So I'm not going to bother with your astrological signs or whether you like long walks on the beach. I'm going to cut to the hard-hitting questions like, what's the last movie you saw?
The last thing that I watched was rewatching Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, interesting. Any reason?
Just, recently Halloween, kind of in the mood, those kind of crazier movies, I guess. And I'm a big fan of it. I remember watching it when it came out. And it was funny because at the time I had not tried any variety of the substances that they do in that movie. And while I still have not done majority of them, I've at least now experienced a few more. But I still loved it being, a very sober, straight-laced person at the time when I saw it. So.
What? We can't stop here. It's bad country. Bryan, what about you? What's your last movie?
Man, I watched this gem on Netflix. It's a recent posting. It's called The King, about Henry V. And it's starring Timothée Chalamet and Rob Pattinson. And I gotta tell you, I don't think I could have enjoyed a movie more on a first watch just based on, you don't know where you're gonna see when you just click on a Netflix movie. It's usually pretty quality, but man, I really enjoyed that movie.
Ah, good one. I didn't know about that one. For me, my last one was the Carrie remake with Chloe Grace Moretz and Julianne Moore. I enjoyed that. It's a fair bit different, and I still prefer the original, but coming off the heels of Halloween, Carrie is one of my favorite horror movies, and I had to see the remake. So,
yeah, I think I actually ended up seeing that one in theaters, which is... I'm not a good horror movie in theater guy. I just always feel like there's something I need to watch on one of the streaming services, and I make it to the theaters so infrequently now that it's frankly shameful. But yeah, that's one of the ones I did catch in theaters, and I thought that was a really good remake. I was solidly behind that.
Yeah. Andrew, name a character actor that you love.
I'll jump in if you need a minute.
Okay, give me a second. Think on that.
Bryan, take this one first. Who's a character actor you love?
This happens sometimes to him, so I don't want to completely peg him as this, but my favorite character actor is probably Brian Cox.
Yeah, you have brought him up a number of times. I gotta say that doesn't surprise me. So that yeah,
big kind of like Dennehy. It's always the police captain kind of thing. But no, by and large, the characters that Brian Cox plays are fairly similar, and I do enjoy him.
Nice. I'm gonna go Steve Buscemi on that one myself.
Okay, I'm just having to Google my. Guillermo Diaz.
Okay, interesting. Where would we know him from?
You know him from Weeds and from Scandal. He's also in Half Baked. He's the Hispanic guy that's part of their crew in Half Baked.
Oh, okay. Now I don't watch those TV shows. So yeah.
Okay. Well, first off, you need to watch Weeds. But then in Scandal,
yeah, Weeds is good.
In Scandal, he's like this kind of crazy, like, expert CIA killer, but he pulls this off in a way that, like, he shows so much emotion of scenes. Like, the guy can really act. He's really, really good. The reason why it took me a second, I was like trying to remember his name, and then finally I remember, I have an internet in front of me. I can look it up by putting in Weeds and Scandal, and he'll tell me. So that's why it took me a second.
Nice. What's your worst movie rental experience from back in the movie rental days, Andrew?
That one's, I believe the movie is called Nothing But Trouble. It's Chevy Chase and
Aykroyd?
Demi Moore, Dan Aykroyd, and John Candy.
Yeah.
We rented it as a family because my parents were super excited because they were like, oh, we love all of these actors, you know, like, this should be a great... And that still to this day is one of the worst movies I've seen of all time. And it was an awful experience renting it because, like, my parents were so unhappy afterwards that they basically, I think they took the movie back, asked for a refund so they could, or at least an exchange to watch another movie because they were so dissatisfied with how bad the movie was. And the guy at Blockbuster was like, you're not the first person to do this.
Good. That's a good one. I know that's a widely disappointing movie for people. Despite the amazing cast, I surprisingly have not seen it in full. I've only caught bits and pieces of it here and there. It wasn't hooking me at the time, so doesn't surprise me.
If you need to have dental work done at all, I highly recommend watching either that or The Thin Red Line. Like, if you need to see a movie that you haven't seen before, but you're also getting dental work done, put on one of those.
Okay.
That movie gets so much hate, it's hilarious.
And if you had a cowboy name, Andrew, what would it be?
I think that would probably be Smug.
Okay.
Didn't reach far for it.
It didn't have to.
Today, what movie are we doing, Brian?
We are doing Tombstone. Wild West at its best.
This movie comes out in 1993. It grosses $14.4 million domestically. It places on the box office that year in 25th, coming in behind The Piano and ahead of The Remains of the Day. The number one movie in 93 was Jurassic Park. IMDb gives it a 7.8. Critics of Rotten Tomatoes give it a 73%, but the audience likes it a good bit better, and the audience scores a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Tombstone premiered in movie theaters 6 months before the Costner and Kasdan's version of Wyatt Earp. So, Andrew, had you seen Tombstone before? If not, what was your takeaway with it?
I had seen Tombstone before. I don't believe I saw it in theaters. I think I saw Tombstone shortly after, pretty much as soon as it came out on video. And since the moment I saw it, this has been one of my top 5 movies of all time. I have probably seen this movie at least a solid 50 times in my life. Like, it's like, I don't even think I have to reach for it to be 50. It might be closer to 100.
So you own this movie and you come back to it frequently then?
Yeah, I think at one point I had it on like VHS, 2 DVD copies, and had a poster up in my dorm room in college.
Nice. What was on the poster?
It's it just said Tombstone and was just like the
4 of them walking. Yeah.
Yeah. I tried really, really hard because I had a really good Reservoir Dogs one that was you're gonna bark all day, little doggy, or you're gonna bite. And I tried really hard to find one because I'd seen it somewhere of the quote where he says, "You gonna do something or just stand there and bleed?"
Nice.
Yep.
So I thought that would be really awesome posters, but I couldn't find that.
Fair. And Brian, as you mentioned before, you have some background with Tombstone as well?
Yeah, I don't remember when I first saw this, but this was probably one of the biggest entry movies into me liking Westerns. Growing up when I was, quite a bit younger, I always thought Westerns were just something that, my dad, my grandfather liked and that sort of thing. So I never gave them a lot of credence. And then I saw Tombstone and I saw Young Guns and I saw Wyatt Earp and all of these, I was just like, oh, these are really good. I should watch more of these. So yeah, this was really like a match lighter for me in terms of the genre.
A gateway drug.
Yeah, gateway drug.
Yeah. You know, for me, I had not seen this one before, so.
Oh, dude.
Shame. Shame.
No,
Shame.
you know, I'm actually interested on that statement alone, just because I know when I give people copies of Usual Suspects or something that I dearly love, and I'm like, man, you don't even know what you're about to watch. That must be a cool thing to like be able to experience something like this for the first time. Now, granted, you may not have enjoyed it. I'm just saying that the opportunity to like something as much as I like this and find it for the first time, I love that feeling.
So I did enjoy it, and I also like what perhaps like you were saying, Brian. I'm not necessarily Mr. Western guy. I have enjoyed some of Clint Eastwood's earlier works, like the Dollars trilogy, Few Dollars More, Fistful of Dollars, and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I really haven't branched out too much beyond them. And as John Wayne stuff is on TV, it doesn't really hook me. And like kind of like you alluded to, like whether it be like the 3:10 to Yuma remake and stuff like that. The genre never really hooked me, but I have to say this one does. This is a cut above the rest, and I did enjoy this. I was also surprised to see that there's some history to go along with it, so that made it interesting as well.
Yeah.
I should warn everybody, though, at this point, we're about to get into the movie, and we're going to have to talk about it, so therefore there are going to be spoilers that lie ahead. So if you haven't seen Tombstone, you're going to want to pause this, go check it out. Brian and Andrew can't implore you enough to go watch it. And we'll be back after these messages.
It is I, the Governor of the magnificent state of California. I am happy to endorse my favorite audio listening podcast show, the Retro Movie Roundtable. I enjoy listening to the multiple episodes of this fine podcast when I am working out on my glutes, hams, triceps, and buttocks in the gym. I need to stay strong so I can stop the fires with my muscles. Please help me in my efforts to be supportive to the Retro Movie Roundtable when you work out your body. It is very important to do this for yourselves. Go to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. You too can get muscles by giving the Retro Movie Roundtable a 5-star review. Like the show on Facebook. Email to retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Take it from me, your 1967 Mr. Universe. This is something you are going to want to do for yourself.
And we're back. Last warning, there will be spoilers that lie ahead, so beware. Andrew, for those who haven't seen Tombstone since 1993, why don't you give people at home a refresher?
More than happy to. This is the story of Wyatt Earp, the shootout at the OK Corral. And it's something that all of us, it's just such a common thing to talk about in popular culture that all of us at least know these names, right? The shootout at the OK Corral is a famous name, right?
Yeah, I think it's really important at this point, though, to kind of take note that this is about a very specific time in Wyatt Earp's life. So the big difference between the Kevin Costner movie and Tombstone is one is a complete bio and one is just about a specific time period.
Very well said. This is specifically dealing with after he's left Dodge City and he is now going with his brothers to try to make it without being a law guy in Arizona. And how the movie starts out is there's a group called the Cowboys, which are a group of bandits. They all wear red sashes, and they find a group of Mexican policemen at a wedding, and they ambush them, and some things are rather nasty there. And then we get quickly to the Earps coming to Tombstone, and this is the story of how the Cowboys and the Earps, along with Doc Holliday, end up clashing with each other. And over the course of the movie, things escalate way beyond what they should. There ends up being a shootout. Of course, our heroes, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, are much better at this than the Cowboys are. And then what ends up happening is the Cowboys come back at the Earps. Wyatt's brother dies. His other brother is injured. And then Wyatt Earp strikes back. And he and Doc Holliday go on a revenge tour and just decimate the Cowboys in so many ways. The reason why I've kept this relatively vague is we are probably going to go in depth on so many of these scenes with so many of the quotes that I didn't want to overdo it on the intro. At the end of the movie, there's a woman that Wyatt Earp has become involved with, and he finds her, and he spends the rest of his days going and getting room service. Guys, let's jump in and talk about all the rest of the details.
Fantastic. I think one of the coolest things about this movie is that there are some very interesting characters, and they go together well. Do you want to talk about the four brothers at all and the different personalities that they have? Andrew.
Yes. Okay, so four brothers. We've got Kurt Russell, Wyatt Earp. We've got Sam Elliott as Virgil Earp. We've got Morgan, and then there were only three in this, correct?
Oh, you're right.
Yes.
You're right. The fourth is not a brother. Good point. Sorry. Three brothers.
And three brothers, and then we get Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, who, when they say that scene stealer, he literally, this movie is the definition of a scene stealer, because I think at the time Kurt Russell was definitely considered to be the larger movie star of the two, and he gave way during the making of this movie of realizing how awesome Val Kilmer was, and put him in position to succeed. It's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar realizing, oh, maybe Magic Johnson needs the ball a little bit more than I do.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of those 80 Showtime's Lakers, but that's an excellent analogy.
I thought you'd appreciate that, Russ.
Yeah, that's an excellent analogy, even though I'm not a Laker fan.
Oh, so getting back to the personalities, I think one of the great things that they set up really early on is that there's some enmity between Virgil and Doc, in that Virgil doesn't exactly approve of how Doc handles things. But at the end of the day, when they need to go to battle, Virgil's really happy that Doc's around.
Yeah, more than happy. And so, just such colorful characters. I mean, you have, Wyatt Earp is this guy who, as Bryan said in this movie anyway, at this point of his life, he's looking to avoid conflict, get away from it, find whatever normal life is and live it. Make some money while he's at it, and kind of, I'm putting it all behind me, which is, I feel, a common theme for Western movies of, like, guy who's tough and has that experience, and then he's, like, drawn back into things. Like, Shane is another good example of this, like, where it's just, like, guy from a troubled past, brings with him a certain set of skills.
So what's interesting about this is that on the historical accuracy side, this isn't really true so much in that the person who actually really had much more combat experience is Virgil, Sam Elliott's character. He had actually served in the Civil War, and he had a lot more experience being a peace officer than Wyatt Earp did. It's just that Wyatt Earp basically only had one thing happen, and it was this big shootout at Dodge City that things went his way. So he was famous because of that story, but he wasn't actually the one that had like a lot of combat experience. That was actually Virgil.
No, that's an interesting point you make there. Virgil's character, Bryan, what do you think about him?
Well, we've very recently talked about my Sam Elliott love, so you can really toss him in on any movie in this sort of position, and I'm going to enjoy it. But he's the gravelly older brother, who's kind of the voice of reason at times, and then he's really the one that in this movie at least pulls them into the conflict with the Cowboys by becoming a police officer in Tombstone. So, or sheriff, excuse me. Actually, I guess it's town marshal. But
I just wanted to say that it's really good to know that you and my mom have a very similar taste in men, because she has a love affair for Sam Elliott also.
Wow.
Listen, I mean, Gray Fox. What can I say?
Hey, in the Veterans Day episode, we declared him a member of the Mount Rushmore of mustaches. So in this movie, he actually has that mustache. When we were soldiers, it didn't feel right without the mustache.
I agree.
It was a little weird.
It's one of those things where it looked like he was like a dog with its had its fur shaved.
You know how evil characters sometimes just add a mustache and then they're evil? I feel like evil Sam Elliott has no mustache and good Sam Elliott does.
No, I think like evil Sam Elliott has changed his mustache into like the curly Q one from you know what I mean, like the evil
Snyder
guy.
Whiplash.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's a character in this that he's just got a big heart and can't say no. And like when he sees this town that's out of order, I got to do what's right. And I liked his character because of that.
I did too. I will just say that I felt like it was hard for him to shine, given how awesome the rest of the cast is, and then particularly Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, that like it's one of the few movies that he's not the scene stealer, I guess. Is normally like I think of him as a guy who like is constantly stealing scenes and has these great one-liners, and he doesn't have as many of the one-liners in this one as I think he does in other stuff.
That's fair. And while you're on the topic, we'll take an intermission here on the brothers. And so Doc Holliday, as you're alluding to, is the guy who puts a big stamp on this. You know, it's funny, Bryan, you've always mentioned liking Val Kilmer, and I've always kind of been like, I don't know, that Batman run was kind of touchy. The Saint wasn't that great. I feel like, you know, Heat was over. I am in the minority when I say I'm not a fan of Heat. I don't like Heat.
I'm just gonna let Andrew's indignation stand for mine too. So just keep going.
Yeah, and so coming into this, I was sitting there going like, well, he's okay in MacGruber. So I now get it though. He's excellent in this.
I think if you whittle down everything you just said, all I heard was Batman wasn't very good.
First off, I love him in that Batman, so maybe we need to do an episode on that. But have you seen this movie called Top Gun before? Because
I'm not going to win any fans by saying this, but I also am not a big Top Gun fan. So
friendship over. From How He Met.
I feel like it's overrated.
I'll toss in another gem here just because I have to plug in any chance I get, but he is also excellent in a movie called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr. It is a phenomenal film. It's a dark comedy, so it's right up my alley. So if you enjoy that sort of thing and you're a fan of Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer, you should watch that like with a quickness.
Also, the biopic of Jim Morrison. You know, I mean,
like I said, yep.
Like I said, I don't have everybody else is like going nuts about all of these things that I'm not on board with, and so this is the first time that like I guess you and Bryan are like, yay, I really like Val Kilmer, and I'm on board with you this time, Andrew.
Well, that's good. Have you seen True Romance?
No.
Okay, you should. One, because check out the cast on that, and two, he's in that and he's awesome. Small part, but he's really good.
So let's talk about him here, though.
Why don't you lead off, Russ? Because I have probably about 1 million. I could probably talk about for 3 hours straight about my love for Doc Holliday. So.
You know, I came in this movie, you know, expecting to be following Kurt Russell as the main character, but you're right. If there's a scene where there's a bar fight about to erupt, or there's a tense moment between Rico and him, and they're bluffing each other at a game of cards, and Doc Holliday is definitely taking all the money and ruling the table out, and I just loved his presence there, his cool charm, as well as nobody's going to get the better of him either mentally or on the card table or with a gun, and there was this cool I've got total control of whatever situation I'm in. And I'm not going to say the Fonz because like it's like he's just so cool. And even though he's like suffering from tuberculosis and he's sweating and he's clearly not doing well, he's still the coolest dude in the room.
It's a southern swagger that he pulls off amazingly in this movie.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. I was trying to like think about it. It's like it's just like it's effortlessly cool is a good way of putting it. Like, which is why I was trying to go to the Fonz, but this is different.
I'll even rewind it, a different bar scene where he's playing poker in that first town, and he's like, "Why, Ed Bailey, are we cross? Are you not my friend? I don't think I could take it if you weren't my friend. There, now we can be friends again."
Puts his guns down.
Yeah, and then
Bailey goes for his, and he still has a knife, and he stabs Bailey in the stomach. Then, like, his girlfriend grabs all the money off the table, pulls her gun out, and it was just like such an awesome scene that he was so on top of everything that he could put his guns down, and he's known as, you know, being so quick that he could put his guns down and use a different weapon when somebody else still had a gun.
Absolutely. And, you know, it just kept driving me nuts that, you know, he's sitting there infected in the lungs with tuberculosis, and he's still sitting there smoking. I was just like, stop doing that. Stop doing that.
Well, I don't think that was a known cause of many ills back then. So it was not. This was still back in time where people were like, "Oh, you have asthma? You should smoke. It'll help."
True.
Well, to be fair, though, there's the scene with the doctor where the doctor says, like, stop drinking, stop smoking, stop staying out all night, you know.
Well, that was from a complete bed rest point of view. He's saying you need rest, and the drinking and the smoking and the nightlife all kind of went together. I'm not saying he was doing it specifically because smoking was known to actually do anything.
Fair enough.
And the other thing I'm wondering is, he's just like walking around town with TB. Like, don't you get put in a sanitarium, like from this? Like, isn't he getting all of his friends and his girlfriend sick?
No.
I don't think it works like that.
It's not air transmittable?
I don't think so.
No, well, let's put it this way. They knew he had TB for a while, and he clearly did take part at the OK Corral and, like, was around for all these times. Were you going to tell Doc Holliday that he needed to get away? Like you just said, he's like, who's going to tell him to leave, right?
That's okay. No, that's fair. And hey, if you've got a gunfight coming up, and in this town, it could be coming up at any moment, I guess he is a guy you'd want on your side.
I think that the scene that I think is the absolute best of what he does is, you know, the opposing side has their own really badass Johnny Ringo, who I think when we get into some of all of the favorite characters or things other people have done, he's the guy who plays him is one of my faves. But they're in a bar where they're in the card room area of the bar, and they're trash talking each other in Latin. Ringo pulls out his gun and starts doing gun tricks and showing how fast he is and how well he can handle his pistol. And Val Kilmer just looks at him, follows it the whole time, and he's got this little shot glass with whiskey in it. So he finishes it, and it's got a little handle on it. And he starts spinning it the exact same way Ringo did with his gun. And he does it everything down to a T. So even though he's drunk and can barely stand, he's still got the wherewithal to follow all of the moves that the guy did, saying that even in my drunk state, I can still memorize what you did and do the exact same thing. And I thought that was just a really excellent scene of showing, without actually showing violence, of showing how awesome he is.
Yeah, that's the exact scene I was referring to earlier, Andrew, for sure. The brother that gets buried on this one a little bit, though, is Morgan Eyre, played by Bill Paxton. I mean, maybe it's just big personalities or whatever, but other than just being young and eager to latch on to whatever his brothers are doing, I don't feel like I get this one as much. He's there more, I guess, to die and to light a fuse.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he's definitely eager. I think he was really showing that younger brother, I can do what you guys do. I'm cool like you guys are. Real quick, I did do a quick search on it. TB is spread through the air. I have no idea what they knew or didn't know about it at the time, but it says you are much more likely to get it or contract it from someone if you have a weak immune system. So I would probably say that given the state of filth that most people lived in the West, there probably are some fairly strong immune systems out there, and maybe that's why he's not just passing it off to everybody.
I guess you're right. Everybody who's alive at this point has a tough immune system. Otherwise, they died at age 2, I guess.
So Russ, going back to Bill Paxton as Morgan, he does actually have what I assume to be your favorite line in the whole movie. I assume that your favorite line in the whole movie is, "Hot damn, this bird is jumping."
That is not it. No. But that's. I mean, there's a lot of good lines in this movie, but no, it's not. It's not specifically that.
Because you're from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
This bird is jumping. I figure that's come on. That line is it's funny because we all know what that means, but could you imagine if any of your friends actually said that line to you? If we've got to Vegas and I said, "Hot damn, this bird is jumping," you guys would be like, you either better be quoting Tombstone or what is the matter with you? Why are you talking like that?
Well, I know personally that's what Russell says every time we're driving by a brothel too. So
every time that has happened, I have said that, and I've never said that.
Well, I guess we know what we're changing on next vacation.
So one thing that didn't work for me as well in this one, and I'm going to guess that I'm going to get a little bit of pushback on here. I didn't think the Josephine character played by Dana Delany is... for me, this part of the story wasn't working as well, partially because Wyatt Earp's character has a wife already with Dana Wheeler-Nicholson, who's from Fletch, by the way. I kind of felt bad for her. They show her in several scenes, like, kind of coming onto the scene of just, like, him oogling and eyeing over Josephine, who's just come into town. And she's sad about it. So then she goes and does opioids and then later dies. So...
Oh, that was going on before Josephine arrived. She was already a drug addict when that started.
He indicated, like, oh, are you hitting that again? Yes, you're right. They alluded to that had happened beforehand, but I guess it makes him seem less savory than if he were alone and single and this starlet from the big stage had rolled into town. He was captivated by her. Somehow, again, the frolicking horseback ride through the woods and stuff like that, it didn't sit as well with me on just knowing that it's like, hey, your wife's at home. I mean, yeah, she's probably like on drugs or something like that, but maybe you can work on that and stop doing that. And I don't know, like... They didn't portray him to be in a dead-end marriage necessarily when they were standing at the train station meeting everybody else's wife. So at least on my first couple of passes through this movie, I didn't sit there and say, like, what a nice love story.
I think what they were trying to portray from early in this movie is that their relationship wasn't doing well. It was not a healthy relationship. He wasn't really happy that she was still using the stuff. Like, he kind of quietly... talks down to her a few times on the drug use thing, and she's kind of bedridden most of the time because she's on it, and I think he got lured away.
Okay, so here's something we need to try to talk about from a historical accuracy point real quick that the movie only very vaguely alludes to. So the Earp brothers, among their many business ventures in the territory of Arizona, one of them is that they were pimps.
Did not know that.
Yeah, so when Ike Clanton says, y'all a bunch of pimps, that's actually in reference to, at least for a little while, that was legitimately one of the things they were doing. I think that the wife, initially, I think that there is some speculation that she had been a prostitute prior to getting with Wyatt, and that he therefore had some concerns about the long-term health of that relationship.
Okay. Well, that helps.
They kind of alluded to it in the movie too, where he was, he'd said something along the lines of, "She was no angel when we got together, and neither was I."
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, it wasn't like they all met at the train station. It was like, "Hello, brother. How's your hooker wife? My hooker wife's doing great." "Oh, great. Your hooker wife's doing great? Okay. Everybody's hooker wife's is happy."
Are you trying to sound like Terrence and Phillip? Because you totally sounded like Terrence.
Terrence, how's your hooker wife?
My hooker wife, buddy.
Yeah.
60 episodes in, and that's our first fart joke. Yes, it's too late.
The story is that if you get a hooker wife, you're going to be really awesome at fighting, and people are going to make a bunch of movies about you, right?
Just don't let her use the opium.
I gotta say though, if they're pimps, then their pimp hat game is weaker than it should be. Instead of just having cowboy hats, they should be like, orange and black zebra striped cowboy hats with sequins around the edge of them.
Oh Lord! I will say this that actually, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm gonna say that. Never mind. Just step back. Never mind.
I'm just picturing the secret. You know what they really should do is get something closer to what Michael J. Fox wears in Back to the Future 3. Because the red and pink one that he wears in Back to the Future 3 because Doc has no idea. Like, that would be awesome. Okay, so just on that, actually, on the attire real quick, how awful do you think it must be to be in like shooting in Arizona and it's like 80 degrees something during the day, wearing these huge long black trench coats?
Yeah, it was wildly hot, and these are wool that they're wearing in addition to that. So I mean, for sure, it's hot to say the least.
We can get back to the pimps. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Bryan, any other thoughts on the story here? I thought it was interesting that the actual OK Corral shooting was a real thing that was actually reported in the paper, and even the line of the Cowboys yelling at point blank range, "I got you, Doc, you son of a bleep." He apparently actually even said, "Well, you're a daisy if you do." I guess that was an actual historical line, so that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, you can always say, like, okay, they weren't quick to witticisms or anything like that, but I could take just about any line from this movie as gospel if you told me it was true. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, yep, I believe he said that.
Did you like the bad guys with Curly Bill and Johnny Ringo and who's the other guy?
Ike Clanton.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and Ike.
And there's Billy Clanton, Thomas Hayden Church's character.
And then there's the other Billy, who's the guy from Northern Exposure and Sex and the City.
Anyway, as far as your question goes, Russ, Powers Boothe is awesome. He's another guy that I like a whole lot, and mostly that started because of this movie. You know, he's also in Watchmen. I don't know why I'm blanking so hard right now, but Sin City. Heck, he even made it into an Avengers movie for World Security Council before he passed. So anyway, that was a big loss, man. Curly Bill's character was awesome in this, and in an effort to not overlap with anybody else's favorite quote, I actually went with a Curly Bill quote.
I guess we've taken most of your cast rundown, but do you want to pick up any of the leftovers?
John Corbett was the guy I was thinking of. He's one of the guys that runs out at the shooting at the OK Corral, and then when Curly Bill gets killed by Wyatt in the stream, he's one of the ones who's there also. I think he might die in that scene, but he's from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Northern Exposure, Sex and the City. Like, there's so many good actors in this. Terry O'Quinn. Like,
that guy. Okay.
I'll touch on a couple here just because they're relevant to some of my future superlatives and whatnot. In addition to the people we've already talked about, and if I touch on somebody we've already talked about again, my apologies. There's actually Wyatt Earp's fourth cousin in the movie who's also named Wyatt Earp. So thought that was a cool thing. He plays Billy Claiborne. Billy Zane as Mr. Fabian. He's kind of the sidekick for the play performance and everything. So he didn't have a huge part, but it's definitely worth mentioning he's in it. I'm kind of doing this from the bottom up too. Billy Bob Thornton, of course, is Johnny Tyler.
That's a fat Billy Bob Thornton too.
Can we talk about that scene for a second? I think that this scene, it's such a pivotal scene to me of setting it up. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but Billy Bob Thornton wasn't given any lines.
Really?
They just basically told him to, like they said, just be a jerk. So when he's sitting there and saying, "Will you shut up? You're more annoying than my sister's kids." Like, this is just Billy Bob Thornton.
Back that queen again, I'll blow you right off that stool.
And I just think that scene where he just comes over and he's just Kurt Russell's so confident. And Billy Bob Thornton goes from being such an arrogant asshole to being quiveringly scared so quickly. I thought that was just phenomenal acting by Billy Bob Thornton. Like, he plays off of Kurt Russell amazingly there, of letting Kurt Russell dominate him and doing it in a way that is really believable, that he's made this switch that quickly to being like, I'm the bad guy, I'm the bad person around here, to being like, oh my God, I'm going to let this person smack me in the face 3 times and do nothing.
Yeah, you're right. And it shows you that they're coming into a town that is very, I guess you could say, wild. There's no order, and they have the presence to hold their own no matter where they go, even in this lawless town. So you're right. That establishes right away that these guys aren't taking crap from anybody. In fact, soon they will be running the town.
Every town needs a pimp, right?
That's right. The pimp of town.
So just a couple other ones I wanted to touch on. Thomas Hayden Church is Billy Clanton and Stephen Lang is Ike Clanton. I have tremendous respect for both of these guys. Charlton Heston is also a cameo in the movie as Henry Hooker, the ranch that they take sick Doc Holliday to toward the end, and I thought it was just worth noting that he was in this just because he was a Western star in his own right through most of his life. We've already talked about the lion's share of everybody else, but Powers Boothe, of course, is Curly Bill Burgess, and Michael Biehn as Johnny Ringo as the 2 leading antagonists of the film.
Yeah, and you got Paula Malcomson and Lisa Collins as the other hooker wives, as we're calling them, which may or may not be true. But it does explain something, that I thought all of these guys have disproportionately hot wives.
So what you're saying is that you personally find hookers to be disproportionately hot?
Well, I'm just saying Sam Elliott's wife is like 2 decades younger than him, and Sam Elliott, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was going to say Sam Elliott's wife looks like he's young enough to be his daughter, and
Nothing wrong with that.
hey, the president says that guy's a winner.
Don't you remember that book that came out, like the oldest living Confederate wife, and it was that like her husband had been in the Civil War when he was like 13, and then when he was like 60, he married her when she was like 13. So then when she was like 80, geez. She was the oldest living Confederate wife.
And this goes back to wardrobe, too. I mean, Dana Wheeler-Nicholson.
Sorry. I was like, how did that go back to wardrobe? Sorry, go ahead, Russ.
Dana Wheeler-Nicholson, again, this goes back into that, not to keep hammering the same point, but she doesn't look like she's like strung out on opioids about like, weeks away from dying. So that was another thing that threw me off there as well. She makes opioids look glamorous. She just like laughs a little bit in bed at one point, and it's like, ah, ha, ha. It's like, then later on, she died.
Wyatt, leave me alone.
Well, the critical scene where things really start going bad is when Curly Bill has gone to an opium den and is off his rocker and shoots the current town sheriff. Right?
Thank you for clearing that up. I wasn't sure what he was on actively, so that was opium that was leading him to end the situation.
Yes. So historical perspective, what happened is we had mass immigration from China, and the big part of the big reason was Chinese immigrants helped build the railroad in the opposite direction. We all know of all the stories about, the relatively waspish people building the railroad going west, but the railroad met in the middle, actually. And it was Chinese immigrants who came over in rather large droves that helped build the railroads going this direction. Well, very quickly with them, they pretty much brought opium dens to every town in the western United States that had a Chinese population.
Oh, that was nice of them.
I mean, hey.
Curly Bill was on Smokium and Matty Earp was on Drinkium.
Yes.
That's a good way of putting it.
So what do you guys think about George P. Cosmatos, the director who, I guess he replaces Stephen Lang as director in the production of this movie?
I'm really curious about what this movie would have looked like if Stephen Lang had stayed the director. I feel like I keep getting drawn back toward this. He's part of my superlatives toward the end. But suffice to say, I'm a big fan of Stephen Lang.
George Cosmatos claims that he was drunk for most of the filming, and that's, I guess, not uncoincidentally why I guess he lost it. The emotion was the most important thing in the movie, Cosmatos said, and if you care about your people, you have a movie. And he alluded to that with Stephen Lang, they didn't have one. So I don't know. There's a lot of unclarity for me on this one. As I read into it, Kurt Russell takes over a fair bit of the direction duties himself, and Cosmatos is almost a supportive role of Kurt Russell to see this movie through the rest of the way. So interesting, muddy Hollywood director change of hands kind of story.
Okay, so just so we're clear, originally this was started being directed by the guy who wrote Glory, right? And then after 1 month of shooting, the only scenes that they had finished, the only thing they had done were the scenes with Charlton Heston on Henry Hooker's Ranch, which is like, 3 minutes of the movie? 4 minutes?
Yeah, just about.
So after a month of shooting, that's atrocious. They drop that guy and they bring in Cosmatos. Is that how you pronounce it?
Cosmatos?
Cosmatos. The reason why, supposedly, is because he is a great yes man as a director, and that behind the scenes, Kurt Russell was actually staying up all night, coming up with all the shooting, like the shot, tomorrow we're going to shoot this, and this. And he actually once he realized how good Val Kilmer was doing, he actually let a bunch of his lines get cut and didn't even shoot them, just so that they could keep the story moving along, meet the shooting schedule that they now needed to be on, and make them a really good movie.
I misspoke. Stephen Lang was not the one who was replaced in this. It was going to be I guess Stephen Lang, but Kevin Jerry is the guy who starts the production behind schedule. So I'm sorry, Stephen Lang. I correct myself here.
No. So Stephen Lang was drunk. Stephen Lang was drunk as an actor, is my understanding.
Okay.
Well, that's probably true because his character was drunk the whole movie.
Maybe that's why no shooting got done.
Okay. All right, then. But anyway, Kevin Jerry was the original director who was replaced by Cosmatos. And then, yes, Russell has alluded to the fact that he had a lot of responsibilities for seeing this one through.
So there's a slightly more to that story in that supposedly what Russell made a deal with him is he said, I won't tell anybody until like a decade after you're dead, that I was the one who actually directed this movie, because like that was their secret handshake deal. And so then Russell waited until like a decade after he dies and then says, yep, I did most of this and explained quite a bit of it. And then Val Kilmer in another interview after this basically backs him up and says, yeah, let's just say that while my memory isn't exactly 100% with Kurt Russell's, there's no way this movie gets made at all if it's not for Kurt Russell, like fair to him.
That's very fair.
But I think he means more than just like his acting. I think he means that like he did tons of stuff on the behind the scenes.
No, you're right. I think there's talk of Russell, after the director change goes through, he removes a lot of stuff. There was a lot of other separate storylines, tangents and stuff going on. And to this movie's credit, there are a lot of characters. And personally, I do have a hard time getting situated at first. And my first pass through this movie, I was like, wait, who are these guys? Wait, who are these guys? But once the players come into play, the story has pretty good focus. And upon a second watch, it goes down pretty well. But I will admit, certainly in the beginning of this, I was having a hard time keeping tabs of, wait, who's who? What is it? Wait, who's what?
You need Western name tags?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just so public domain that you should just know who Doc Holliday is. But like, he's like, I'm Doc Holliday. And then you should know, but I didn't know. I did some history looking up after the fact, and I now know about Wyatt Earp more so, but this was my introduction to the character.
Oh, wow, okay. So I guess maybe that's at least the difference for me, having grown up in South Dakota and Colorado. You learn a lot more about like the history of the Western United States and Westerns, right? There's a reason they're called Westerns, I guess, and not Easterns.
That's right, and I guess I'm too much of an Easterner.
All the great Eastern movies of the film past.
Cosmatos said of making this movie, all machine guns and helicopters don't mean anything. It takes research and hard work and watching old movies to be able to do this. As the new director, he brought a demanding, hard-nosed sensibility to the set, which led to conflicts with some of the crew members, most famously with the cinematographer William Fracker. I guess he was more of a stern guy, and it's kind of interesting that, to what you're saying, Andrew, of if Kurt Russell is kind of leading this stuff behind the scenes and Cosmatos is more of the yes-man, it's interesting that he kind of did have this, I guess, as they said, hard-nosed sensibility to him.
Well, think of it this way. As a director, you basically have two jobs. You need to be creative, and you need to tell everybody what to do, be a manager, right? Sounds like he was pretty good at being a manager. Sounds like maybe the creativity aspect of like knowing what to tell everybody to do, he didn't know so much. But once you give him, say, hey, this is what you need to tell everybody to do, it sounds like he did a pretty darn good job. I think, didn't he have a similar thing with Rambo 2, where he came in and worked on it? And basically, like, there's speculation that he wasn't 100% the guy who was actually the brains behind the operation, but because he's such a good task manager, still got stuff done.
Interesting. That would be very congruent with both of these accounts then. So that does probably make sense.
I thought I saw something alluded to that, but to be honest, I was so Tombstone focused that I didn't go down that rabbit hole. I probably should have.
What do you think about the storytelling, Brian? I mean, is it coherent to you, or is it too many things at one time, or does it work nicely for you?
I've actually read a fair amount of books on Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, both fiction and nonfiction. One of the things that got me about this movie is there are some subtle but fairly stark discrepancies between Costner's Wyatt Earp and Russell's Tombstone. And not that matters at all. They're both pieces of fiction. Just more my own curiosity wondering how it did go down. Because in this, in Tombstone, you have more Virgil taking on the responsibility of town marshal than that becoming an issue with the cowboys who are known to be the law around town. Whereas in Wyatt Earp, Kevin Costner is, saying he's the one saying there needs to be law and I'm not backing down from these guys. And it was less to do with his brothers getting involved. They sort of went with him on it. Just stuff like that. So in terms of storytelling, look, you can make 100 of these movies and I'll likely watch every single one of them, and you can have minor differences or creative flourishes wherever you want, but still phenomenal film.
That's a good point.
I was just going to say on the storytelling, I thought that the pacing for the amount of information that they choose to get through was pretty phenomenal. I think that, so for example, in the beginning scene where their cowboys ambush the Mexican police and slaughter the wedding, McMasters has that, it's just the one scene, just the one quick look at his face, but he looks away in disgust, like, I don't really want to be a part of these people, And then when, at the end, he then turns from the Cowboys and goes off, riding with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday on the revenge tour, just because of that one scene, it makes sense when he's like, not after tonight, no, we're not with them anymore. Like, all it took was that one boop. And so that's part of the reason why I think the storytelling is so good, is because they get so much information done in a pretty short amount of time, considering.
That's fair.
You are right about that, and I felt like the movie started off in a confusing fashion, and I honestly felt that the end felt rushed because you go from this really big climax of the shootout with Doc Holliday and Johnny Ringo, and the next thing you know you're in the sanitarium, and it's just like and then it's over, and it was like, oh, this whole gathering up all the cowboys and shooting them up kind of thing. There's like maybe a chapter of this that to like Bryan's tendency to always want more. I kind of wanted to see a little more of that vendetta.
I am 100% behind you, Russ.
Oh, yeah. Now, if we redo this movie nowadays, this movie is not a movie. This is call it an 8 to 10 episode series on either Netflix or Hulu.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because it's like that middle episode when you actually have the shootout at the OK Corral, right? That one's going to get huge ratings. But then you still have more episodes. Like HBO could do this Game of Thrones style.
That all makes sense. And like I said, today movies have turned into trilogies, which is more like TV, and TV have an ever expanding budget and are more like movies. So what you're describing is the ever blurring lines of TV and movies.
Well, I think this is probably a good time of any to talk about this, but one note I do have for this movie is Palm Star Media has purchased the rights for 2 of Mary Doria Russell's books on Doc Holliday with the intent of making them into a film. Both books, the books are called Doc and Epitaph, and they have already cast Jeremy Renner as Doc Holliday. And I'm like, yep, I'll see that.
I was going to say, you're a big Jeremy Renner guy, if I recall.
Yep, I'm game.
I guess I don't really see him playing a character that has good aim.
We're in the Wild West, and to me this town feels, I don't know if there is a good way of doing this or not. Again, maybe Andrew, your Western Wild West history is better than mine, because that is honestly a part of history class that I don't get a heavy dose of. It feels like this is just your typical Western movie set. Is that a fair statement? One main street up the middle of town, wood boardwalks and stuff, but then oddly enough, fairly extravagant interiors, which is always a bit of a surprise given how shot together everything else seems to be.
Some of these things are really accurate. For example, the tombstone that they have in the movie that says, "Here lies Lester Moore, shot by a .44."
No less, no more.
So there's 2 of those that exist. One that's actually real in Arizona, okay? Like was a real tombstone. And then out here in California at Knott's Berry Farm, they have a Western part, and that's actually where they film a lot of stuff, but it's taken from that original. Somebody saw it, and then when they built Knott's Berry Farm's Western area, they put that in as a replica of the original, and that's the one that they use in Tombstone. That portion of it was shot here in Knott's Berry Farm in Orange County. So I think from the sets and everything, I think they did a really phenomenal job of trying to trying to capture that juxtaposition between basically this town was just tense in portions of it not that long ago, and now you have, you know, these casinos and brothels and whiskey and all this stuff coming in, and trying to show that. I think it's hard to do, and I think the one thing they could have done a little better job is that a lot of the cowboys weren't just cattle thieves, that a lot of them were actually cattle ranchers, and it was basically the issue was the people who live out in the country versus the people who live in the city. The Earps were the city boys, and the cowboys were the people who live out in the country. And that was a lot of the anger between the two groups, or the class warfare, I guess, if you want to call it.
That's good insights there. Do you feel like this would be accurate for Tombstone, Arizona at this point in time, which was, I guess, a booming town that had, you know, gone from very small to increasing in size all of a sudden?
I think it is. I think that they tried really hard to get as many things as accurate as possible. Obviously, they can't, you know, it's a movie. They're not going to be able to get everything. But they tried, you know, they tried really, really hard to not have things that were unrealistic for that time period. So I think this is probably as good as you could get. By the way, for anybody listening who likes history, check out the book called Not So Wild, Wild West. It's about basically the myths about the Wild West that we have, and it's pretty interesting.
Bryan, one thing I did like in this movie was the end scene with the contrast of going to the wintry scene at the end. Were there any other unexpected scenes? Like, there's some forest scenes in this as well, like where the big shootout is and the trees and stuff like that. There's a little more variety than your typical Western.
Absolutely. So I have a limited experience in Arizona, but I can tell you, after driving from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Flagstaff, you see a lot of the same thing, but then you definitely see the variations that you can get in both states. I would say that's as accurate as you could probably be.
Yeah, I like that it wasn't just a dust bowl. Somehow, when I watch a Western, the fact that everything's all tan and dusty and, you know, just everything's made out of wood and everything's just covered in dust, sometimes it actually wears on me a little bit. I didn't have those moments of, whether it be the horseback ride, which I'm not a fan of that scene, as I mentioned earlier, I still liked the change in scenery quite a bit. And I really like the wintry finish as well. It's a nice contrast to show you that they've traveled elsewhere and that they are traveling the world.
Up in Alaska.
Yeah, traveling the world and enjoying room service. So I think
that's a good point, that too often in the Westerns, they try too hard to make everything, you know, too Dust Bowl. Obviously, it's not all desert, because if it is, you wouldn't be sitting there walking through it. Like, you wouldn't choose to live there, right?
Right.
So there is stuff that's non-desert around, and it's just, there's a lot of desert, you know?
You know, I just realized I messed that up. The end of Tombstone is in, Sacramento with the snow, and the end of Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner is when they're on the ship in Alaska.
Thank you. I thought that was correct, but I didn't want to.
Yeah. No, I thought about it for a minute and realized my mistake. I've watched both of these a lot.
I was talking about the Arizona, so they shot on location, and this is where I just wanted to point out to earlier what you were saying. It is 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 56 degrees Celsius, by the way, for our European listeners, which we have more of all the time. We appreciate you. So they are wearing black wool in 134 degree Fahrenheit weather in that birdcage theater scene, full of people, unair conditioned. That doesn't sound fun.
No, that sounds like nowadays
the opposite of fun.
I think, people would riot. Somebody would get killed just from that. Like, people would be like, I can't be in this heat.
You might shoot at Billy Zane too.
But that goes into another thing. You know, we talked about briefly about immune systems and stuff like that. Just being used to a different thing. I mean, I'm not saying that it's right, but I mean, they didn't even know what air conditioning was back then. So at that point, if you're just warm all the time, then it doesn't become weird that you're hot. You know what I mean?
Oh, add a mustache on top of that, because apparently all the mustaches in this movie are real.
So regarding, the time period, one of the things most people don't realize is dying from heat wasn't really a thing. The big concern was dying of cold. So that's the reason why everybody's got all this wool on, because they're like, yeah, I can live with being hot. If I get cold, I'm going to die.
That's a good point. Because it does get cold in the desert as well at night. So that's an excellent point. Hard place to live, really.
Hard way to live.
Las Vegas is in a desert. All you got to do is transport in, a couple $100 billion worth of casinos, and water, and you're good.
Speaking of cold, Val Kilmer would lay on a bed of ice in order to have the shivers and look pale and stuff for his deathbed scene.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a cool thing.
Okay, the other thing that I thought was really cool about Kilmer is, he doesn't know how to play the piano, or he didn't at that point in time. He learned how to play that one piece by Chopin.
I love that scene.
He practiced that he took him like 6 weeks. He just learned how to play that piece because he doesn't know how to play the piano.
That's very cool.
And one more, how much I love Val Kilmer and his abilities is when him doing the knuckle rolling with the chips. That's something of something he does in more than one movie. In Top Gun, he does it with a pen. And I think it's with Real Genius, he does it with quarters.
Do they make mention of the fact that in addition to his talents of music and gambling and gunslinging, that he's also a dentist? I don't know. Did they mention that?
No, I don't.
They definitely do it in Wyatt Earp.
I was wondering what made him Doc Holliday, and that's because he's a dentist. So that's how he got his name Doc. I was curious about that, and I looked that up, being that this is a real guy. So
very cool. I had no idea. I remembered that in Wyatt Earp he was a dentist, that they mentioned that, but I don't think that comes up at all in Tombstone. I feel like...
Are you ashamed of your profession, Wyatt Earp? I was a dentist. I was not ashamed of being a dentist.
What do you guys think about the soundtrack here, talking about the Chopin in it, but what about the rest as a whole?
To me, I was paying attention, trying as hard as I could on this watch through to pay attention to that, and I have to say, I just feel like it's scored well. And they do just a really good job of like using music at the right time. So, for example, in the beginning scene when the priest comes out and starts saying the line about pale horse that will come, quoting the Bible, when Johnny Ringo just shoots the priest in the head, and that right when that happened, they do like right as he's about to do that, they just right then when they have music come on, I thought everything was just really well timed. Whoever edited it and put it all together did an excellent job. Whether it was Cosmatos, Kurt Russell, a slew of people, I think they really brought it together, because honestly, when I'm watching it, I'm not paying attention to the music. I'm just letting the music kind of guide me through what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was curious. I know you guys have both watched this one more than me. Frye, is this something that gets in your head and you'll hum to yourself for a week?
No, I think it's used as a tool to progress and show emotion, but it's not something that I'm like, oh, I've got the Tombstone music stuck in my head again.
Yeah, I agree. It was serviceable, but I didn't have that epic nature to it that I thought maybe it would, because there's some westerns that do have some amazing soundtracks out there. Jerry Goldsmith was originally attached to the score for this film, but he had to quit due to other conflicts, and so Goldsmith recommended Bruce Broughton to do the score of the film. So yeah, Bruce Broughton ended up doing the score for the film.
I think he does a good job. Compared to all of the other things I love about this movie, it's not probably in the first 15 things I'd mention.
Right.
Being honest, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It means he just this wasn't the score wasn't. This wasn't a movie where the score was supposed to shine. The score was supposed to be the sixth man. Set screens and rebound.
I feel like there's moments of tension that this movie doesn't do. Again, going back to say for instance the Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, or Good, Bad, and the Ugly. There's some great scenes where the tension's coming up at a conflict that is coming, which is something that a lot of westerns do really well. They milk this tension of this showdown that's about to come, and there are tense moments in this. Whether it be the shootout between the unveiling that Doc Holliday is there to fight with Ringo, or whether it be the the shootout in town, the OK Corral shootout. I didn't feel like there was build up in a crescendo and delivery of a climax in the music. And so while I said it's serviceable, I do find myself sitting there saying this is an area where there could be some improvement.
I think that part of that though is that the crescendo is built up so much more of the dialogue, particularly with Val Kilmer's dialogue being, I think, honestly, the driving force in so many spots. The scene with him and Johnny Ringo when Ringo's drunk and is like, I want your blood. And Doc Holliday's like, that's my game. That's just my game. And then they're all like, oh, well, we can't let Doc Holliday kill Johnny Ringo when he's drunk. So all the cowboys grab him because they know that he's too drunk and he'd lose in that fight. right? I think that's how the dialogue builds that up, because then when, he's expecting Kurt Russell to be coming out from that tree, and instead it's Doc Holliday, and he delivers that amazing line of, "Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked right over you, or like you look like a ghost just walked right over your grave." Like, oh my God, like that tension from those earlier scenes between those two. And so much of the rest of the fighting hadn't involved them up to that point, right?
Yes.
So that's what I thought made it. That's where I think that the score did a good job of getting out of the way, because I feel like the tension was really built up in the dialogue.
I like the, I was just playing, and he's like,
I wasn't.
Yeah, I wasn't.
That was like, seriously, if that were me, I'd have been like, oh,
yeah.
No, that was my favorite part of that back and forth between them. I was just clowning, that's all. I wasn't.
How do you even classify those scenes? Because to me, like when I was thinking about best quotes, there were more than once when it's Ringo and Holiday talking that I'm like, well, this whole scene is the best quote. Like the last 30 seconds of dialogue is all one great quote back and forth between these two. Like that happened at least twice in that movie. It just phenomenal. Like that scene right there, obviously being one of them, and the Latin scene, I think, being the other.
Yeah, you're right. So it's time to look for this. Brian, do you have any look for this moments?
I do. This is actually about Stephen Lang. So you have Ike Clanton, who is probably the third most notable cowboy in here. And he really likes this type of movie. He was Pickett in Gettysburg. He actually switches his Confederate focus to Stonewall Jackson in the movie Gods and Generals. And he's also, he goes kind of a little bit further outside the box with Colonel Quaritch in Avatar.
Oh, really? Oh, I did not connect all of that until now. I'm glad you connected those dots to me somehow.
Yeah, so Ike Clanton in this is actually the main bad guy from Avatar.
Nice. Not Giovanni Ribisi. Not the guy who's getting unobtainium, which is still a terrible name.
the military bad guy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, I have to say, for being a movie that made so much money, I have never even once considered rewatching that movie again, and I'm never around people that are like, oh, you know what we should do? We should rewatch Avatar.
Well, you should, because the sequel is going to be on its way.
They've actually penned in 4 of them.
Oh.
Yep. Because James Cameron's really testing it out with like...
His name is James Cameron.
Yes, you want more of this, don't you? And Andrew's sitting there going like, I didn't really ask for any more of that.
No budget too steep, no sea too deep. Who's that? It's him, James Cameron.
Like, hey, if he wants to do, other good stuff, that's great. But honestly, Avatar was just not really worth it.
So what you're saying, you'd rather have another 3 movies of Titanic? Is that what you're asking for?
I think what we're saying is we really need another Hurt Locker.
I think that I'd rather see James Cameron maybe do like a live-action He-Man remake. That's what we could do. James, you know what he should do? He should do Aquaman.
Okay.
That's an entourage too.
Oh, I thought you were going with the fact that he did The Abyss. Sorry.
No. He directs Aquaman in Entourage.
Okay.
And for the people, 2021 brings Masters of the Universe, the live-action He-Man movie by Aaron Nee.
So, Andrew, do you have any look for this moment?
I guess it would be Jason Priestley's character. I thought that I would probably say that the best romantic relationship in the movie is between Jason Priestley and Billy Zane.
Yeah?
Huh.
Like, they seem to probably have the healthiest relationship of all the couples.
I guess. Wait, Virgil and his wife are actually, they're pretty solid.
I still have one good arm to love you with.
The reason why it explained that they were together was that he was a pimp and that's why she was a prostitute 40 years younger than him.
That is true. But they did seem like, I mean, she wasn't done with him. She's like, oh, your arm's busted up. I'm out.
That's true. Okay.
No, but that's a good point, though. Yeah. We did declare her as a hooker wife. So yeah.
I feel like if we had like a broader listenership, that we'd be getting crucified for the hooker wife thing in this episode.
Wouldn't we just be saying they're one of Henry Hooker's wives?
There you go.
We do now. That's the thing. So, so my look for this moment is going to be Virgil and Morgan were not actually shot on the same night in real life. In fact, Virgil was ambushed and wounded on December 28th of 1881. Warrants were issued for Ike and Phil Clanton. So this is according to arrest records, and the charges were then dropped due to lack of evidence. Morgan was shot playing pool at 10:50 p.m. on March 18th in 1882. So that's a good 4 months later. He died in about an hour after the shooting. And Pete Spence, Frederick Bode, and Frank Stitwell, and Indian Charlie Cruz, and one other individual were charged as the suspects of that shooting. A judge could not indict them because the primary witnesses was Spencer's wife, and according to the law, a spouse cannot be compelled to testify against a spouse, and the Cowboys went free because it was the Wild West, and law don't play around here.
Nah, law, man. Law don't go around here.
Yeah, law don't go around here. Yeah.
Savvy.
Yeah. Separate situations in real life. But hey, good movie telling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing is you definitely do, if you watch this movie and you're expecting this to be a play-by-play of historical accuracy, it's not. They tried to get a lot of things right, but at the end of the day, Kurt Russell was trying to make a movie that flowed and that you'd want to rewatch. And that got done.
Yeah, and I think it was Kubrick. You and I did the Shining episode, Andrew, and he said, realistic is nice, but interesting's more important.
Yep, and I think that Tombstone, as particularly compared to Wyatt Earp, is way more interesting. As just a comparison, I've watched Tombstone at least 50 times. I think I've watched Wyatt Earp 6.
I've been guilty of fast forwarding through like the first hour of Wyatt Earp. Like, you only need to see why Wyatt Earp is the way Wyatt Earp is so many times before you can just kind of get to the meat of Dodge City and then go from there. And that's no disrespect. I think it's, in terms of a fictional biography movie, Wyatt Earp is a strong piece. And I have never regretted having both of these movies, as options. I've even put together what I would have done in terms of casting if I could steal people from both movies and kind of put together a stronger lineup, in my opinion. And yeah, I don't know, man. This is a lot of fun to tinker with.
Yeah, and I think it's time to go to my favorite part of the show. Andrew, are you ready to hand out some awards?
I am.
Let's start with you, MVP.
Okay. This is really tough for me. I think this is the toughest award to hand out because I know what Kurt Russell's contribution is, but it's got to be. But at the end of the day, I had to go with Val Kilmer because there are T-shirts, tons of T-shirts made with quotes, primarily his quotes. Kurt Russell has like 2 quotes. Doc Holliday has like 8 quotes. And every day when I'm on Facebook, there's always like T-shirts being advertised that say like "I'm your Huckleberry" or "You're no Daisy at all." Like, there's just so much here from him that it's got to be Val Kilmer, but no disrespect to Kurt Russell.
All right, Bryan, MVP.
Yeah, definitely Val Kilmer. I mean, he, like Andrew said at the beginning of this, he steals this movie. You want to see the story furthered, but in the end, at least in my head, like, you're kind of just waiting for the next awesome Val Kilmer scene.
Well, I'm also going to go with Val Kilmer. It's a clean sweep, and now I'm starting to get why. Again, I'll come around to Val Kilmer. I warmed up to him a lot in this movie. He was great in this movie. Not just good, great.
I think we just need to Clockwork Orange you with Val Kilmer, and you'll be okay.
That's funny you bring that up, Andrew, because I threatened to do that to one of my employees in some movies yesterday. So I'm glad we're on the same page on just forcing people to watch things that we like.
Please don't put hooks on my eyelids. I'll watch movies willingly.
Well, see, at least know that Kurt Russell wouldn't do that because he's a libertarian.
So best supporting actor, Andrew.
I'm going to go with Johnny Ringo. Biehn. How do you pronounce his last name?
Michael Biehn.
Biehn. Okay. He's somebody that I'm a big fan of. I think that he is phenomenal in Navy SEALs. And he's also in The Rock. He's the leader of the group that gets slaughtered in Alcatraz. Yeah, he's again the leader of a group of Navy SEALs, and they get slaughtered. I thought he just did a phenomenal job in this of making it believable that he was that badass, that he really was ready, you know, like that he was better than Wyatt Earp, and that really the only person that could beat him was Doc Holliday. And, you know, he has quite a few scenes that I feel that if it weren't for Val Kilmer, he would have stolen the scene. But, you know, he at least held his own with Val Kilmer, which to me is saying something.
Okay, I like it. That's a great pick. Bryan, what about you? It's the best supporting actor.
I went with a bad guy also, but a little bit different direction. I went with Powers Boothe as kind of the mastermind of the Cowboys. You really see him basically save the gang from dying sooner than it did. Like if he made a couple different decisions at different times, then they could have just had it all out at once, and it wouldn't have been this, you know, long drawn out vengeance piece. So I'm not giving him kudos for being a good person, but in terms of seeing the writing on the wall a few times, he definitely, I feel like he acted through the part of that leadership as a terrible person. Does that make sense? Sorry.
He looks like he really enjoys being a bad guy, and that's always a good kind of bad guy.
Frye, that was actually who my final two for Best Supporting Actor came down to. But the scene that caused me to pick Biehn, or, you know, Johnny Ringo over him, is when they're at the play and he goes, and they're just seeing the devil makes the deal with Faust, and Curly Bill goes, tell you what I'd do is I'd make that deal and then I'd crawfish that devil right in the ass. And he turns to Johnny Ringo and he goes, what would you do? And his response is what sold it for me, that he deserved Best Supporting Actor. I already did it. And I'm just, and that look on his face when he says that is just like, you understand, being this type of person, you've already made your deal with the devil. Just phenomenal. But agreed, two great choices.
And I technically picked Michael Biehn for my Best Supporting Actor as well, but for variety's sake, I'm going to give a nod to Avatar's very own Stephen Lang.
Excellent. Good.
But yeah, I just liked him in this movie. He did a great job. So much so that I didn't identify him as who he was later. So next one, Hidden Gem, Andrew.
I thought Michael Rooker. Like I said early on, his scene with the very initial scene where that they're at the wedding, and it looks like that most likely what's going to happen is that they are going to do inappropriate things with the new bride, and the look on his face, just that one scene is enough that then later on when he's like, nope, I'm quitting the Cowboys, and it's very clear that if you quit the Cowboys, you kind of got to join the people against them, because otherwise they're just going to kill you anyways, right? So it makes sense. But just that one little, he's not in it that much. He doesn't have a lot of talking lines, but I think he's, Yondu does a great job.
Yeah, I was having fun, except for the murder, the plundering, and the rape parts. But yeah, Bryan, Hidden Gem.
Just keying back in, Henry Hooker, played by Charlton Heston. I thought that was a good nod to a veteran of Western film franchises. Just how they worked him in there, and he got to say a little bit of swagger piece on his own. So anyway, I just thought it was cool that they had that Charlton Heston cameo.
I'm gonna go with the hidden gem of the priest of Pedro Almoranderes. He's the priest at the beginning. I knew that these bad guys were really bad when they took him out, but I liked him standing up to them, and limited little part here right in the very beginning, but I'm going to give it to the priest.
Nice. That's a shout out. Is he from anything that we might know?
He said something about a sick horse.
By the way, that guy's also in some funny stuff too. I've seen him, the guy who says the Spanish is worse than your English.
He's also, so Pedro Almoranderes. He's got another R in his name. It makes me have a hard time saying this, but Almoranderes?
Almoranderes?
Yeah, Almoranderes. Thank you. He's in License to Kill from 1989 as well, which is a Bond movie.
Wait, was that one of those ones that we forget was made?
It was a Dalton one.
No, yeah, okay, it was a Dalton from 89. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
he's in Once Upon a Time. Yeah, he's in Once Upon a Time in Mexico and Mask of Zorro as well. The Mexican.
But yeah, that's one of those Bond movies that we just kind of pretend wasn't made, kind of like, the Hulk movie.
Oh, this is my turn to shame you. No, all Bond is good Bond.
I I'll watch any Bond movie, but not all Bond movies are created equal.
Oh, I'll take the worst Bond movie on any day, and I'll be happy with it. Yeah, give me Die Another Day or Octopussy, and I'll still be a happy camper.
All right. Look, I'm not against the statement that give me a bad Bond movie and I'll watch it. I'm with you there. I just don't think that there are some lows in the franchise. All I'm saying.
All right. So, recast Andrew.
I don't think the guy that plays Biehn, the town marshal or the county marshal, the aristocrat guy.
Yeah.
I get what they're doing there, and I think he's okay, but I feel like that if you got somebody, actually, you know who I think would have played him great, is the person that was originally supposed to play Doc Holliday. They originally were going for Willem Dafoe. And I could see Willem Dafoe playing Biehn as much better than the guy who plays Biehn.
You know who I always liked in this position of the dirty cop, and I'm going to blank on his name, but the guy who plays the sheriff in Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis?
No, I don't know.
So it's Bruce Dern, and his character from Last Man Standing was Sheriff.
We all know who Bruce Dern is.
Okay.
Okay, well, then I would like to actually toss in an additional recast. I'm not a big fan of the of Wyatt Earp's hooker wife.
Maddie?
Maddie. I thought that Michelle Pfeiffer would be a much improvement of similar time period and similar look, but much better actress.
But Dana Wheeler-Nicholson, so you're not a fan of her. Okay, I guess, I don't know. I'm going to give her a pass because she was in Fletch, and I just like that one. So she did underscore the severity of an opioid addiction. So
I'll rewatch Fletch and tell you what I think.
Okay. My recast is going to be Bill Paxton for Morgan Earp, and I'm going to put Robert Patrick in his part there. Robert Patrick's pretty busy around this time. He's in Fire in the Sky and Last Action Hero, but I'm going to say I'm going to pretend that he has time to squeeze one more in there. So,
what's the age difference between the two of them?
Robert Patrick was born in 58, and Paxton was born in 55. So there's a 3-year difference, and Robert Patrick's 3 years younger.
I think that'll work.
Okay, yeah, that'd work.
I like Robert Patrick, and I think this would be a good place for him.
Just so everybody knows, we're talking about Robert Patrick is the bad guy in Terminator 2.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, and he's also in Fire in the Sky came out that year as well. He's also in X-Files. He's in X-Files as
Russ,
well.
I'm telling you, you just say the bad guy in Terminator 2, and everybody knows exactly who you're talking about. I had no idea who Robert Patrick was until just now. When I went and Googled it, I was like, oh, why didn't you just say the bad guy from Terminator 2?
You mean you don't recognize his signature role from Spy Kids in 2001?
I think I can safely say I've avoided seeing Spy Kids.
Bryan, recast.
So I also went down a different road for this one. This kind of goes into my picking my favorite cast for like a Wyatt Earp co-movie. And Joanna Paula plays Big Nose Kate in this one, and I think she did a great job. Isabella Rossellini plays her in Wyatt Earp. So this is not my recast. My recast is going to be Joanna Going plays the actress that Wyatt Earp eventually falls for in Wyatt Earp, and I like her a lot better than Dana Delany.
So I have nothing against Dana Delany. She's charming, I guess.
But Joanna Going is hot.
Is or was?
Hashtag no disrespect to Dana Delany.
Yeah, I was going to say that all of the above is good here. Andrew, what's your best shot of the movie?
Best shot of the movie is at the shootout at the OK Corral when it looks, there's that real tense moment. And then Val Kilmer winked at one of the brothers with him.
Oh, my God.
And that right there, just that wink is just then followed right then by, oh my God, Kurt Russell, Wyatt Earp knows everything's about to go down. Just thought it was amazingly shot, and then again, they let Val Kilmer be the driving force there because it's him winking at the guy that makes him pull his gun, which makes everybody else pull their gun.
Yep.
That's my best shot.
This is at the end at the face-off with him and Ringo?
No. This was at the
shootout at the OK Corral.
Okay, thank you.
When he's got the shotgun and he's near the horse, right? Like she's got the shotgun and he winks.
Now I got it. Yes, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, Corral did it for me. Bryan, best shot.
So yeah, my best shot's gonna be Kurt Russell as he requotes the Spanish priest when he's standing on the train platform and just yells, "You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me."
Yeah, powerful moment. For me, the best shot's got to be when Doc Holliday is approaching Ringo. When you think it's Wyatt, then it turns out of the shadows that it's actually Doc Holliday. That lighting transition is really good. And I want to also give a nod to, there's a scene where Wyatt is walking down through a front porch area along a boardwalk towards Josephine on the boardwalk, and he goes from being in silhouette, and his head turns up, and as he moves into the light, he's illuminated, and it's a very dramatic fashion. And so they had done that once before in the movie with Wyatt, and then later on in the movie, they take that same entry kind of approach, but then it's Doc Holliday. So really like that.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point on that lighting transition of it being a really good way of setting that scene up. Because as I was rewatching it, I was noticing that same thing, that even still, even though I know that it's Doc Holliday, the amount of time until you actually see that it's his face is incredibly well done, because it really sets up that surprise for Johnny Ringo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was surprised too. Change one thing. Andrew.
Frye, you got to go first on this one.
Okay. Russell, you actually said this earlier during the podcast today. I want less montages and more full-length fights. Like that whole fast forward, I see a red sash, I kill a man wearing it. I get it, but let's extend that. Let's have some more long-term vengeance happening.
That's a great choice. What about you, Andrew?
I think I just honestly, in similar vein, I could actually use for it to be longer, or like I need a Tombstone 2. You know what I mean? I want more. When I watch that movie, I'm like, okay, so when am I going to get to see Val Kilmer play Doc Holliday again? Because clearly we just need to get somebody, making up like what should have been his next role after this were like the imaginary Doc Holliday movies. And he just plays that character doing stuff, and it's just completely made up, and everybody would watch it. Like that was like billions of dollars lost, because I just want to see more of it. That's the one thing.
Prequel Doc Holliday movie is you need that?
I think we needed it 25 years ago. I'm not so sure that...
We'll see how Val does in Top Gun 2.
I have worries.
My change one thing is going to be Wyatt seems like a jerk for just riding with Josephine in the woods and stuff like that. And I mean, earlier you can tell that you can always know that he's tempted. I mean, anybody will be tempted by somebody who you either connect with or that you think is attractive or something like that. But I mean, we would like Wyatt a lot better if he really didn't seemingly slowly give into that resistance a lot better. I just would like it better if he didn't have a wife in the story or whatever. It made Josephine the other woman, so to speak. So I talked.
Sure, but they're not married, right? Yeah, she took his name, but they talk about it in the movie where it's like, do you actually consider yourself a married man? Like they never actually got married. She just goes by Matty Earp.
Sorry, it's the hero of the movie, so you want the hero to be a little squeakier clean than that. I do, anyways. Best quote of the movie, Andrew.
I feel like that it's just got to come down to "I'm your Huckleberry."
That seems to be that tends to be the dominant one for sure.
It's interesting that there was debate for a while as to whether or not the line is "I'm your Huckleberry" or "I'm your huckled bearer," because what that means is they were using huckled casks, whatever that means at the time. So it's basically saying, I'm going to be the pallbearer because I'm going to kill you, is what people thought that the line was. But there's actually, somebody went back, found one of the scripts, and the line is actually in the script, I'm your Huckleberry.
Well, a huckleberry can mean also, like you said, it's a term for a kind of pallbearer who carries a coffin and the actual gravesite, and it's their job to stay sober and to watch and to make sure that what's called a grave bell doesn't ring, to make sure they didn't bury somebody alive, because in Victorian era people had this big fear of being buried alive, so they stuck a string around your finger and then up out of the grave up through a little pipe so that you could ring a bell if you were actually buried alive. So it's not a fun job, but saying that is like a threat, and saying like, I'll be there to put you in your grave and watch and make sure that you don't come out. Well,
nice. I think he effectively does that.
Best quote, Bryan.
I went a little bit more whimsical on this because it's not the best quote in the movie, but it's definitely the thing that I have quoted the most from the movie. Curly Bill stumbling out of the opium den, and he just says, "I feel great. I feel capital."
I can attest that that is the line he quotes the most from that movie.
I have stumbled out of so many bars in Morgantown, West Virginia, saying, "I feel capital."
Just don't shoot the marshal while you're at it.
Never had that occur, but definitely use that line a lot.
My best quote, so Turkey Creek Jack says, "Doc, you ought to be in bed. Why are you doing this anyway?" Doc says, "Wyatt Earp is my friend." And he's like, "Oh, I got lots of friends." And Doc's like, "I don't."
Yeah, that is also one of the best lines of the movie. I back up everything we have said here because you're right. That was a very, very serious answer that he gave, and that deadpan look that he does when he delivers stuff like that, the same way he does, like, "I wasn't." It's just the way he does that is so chilling.
A couple honorable mentions there is "I'm in My Prime" by Doc Holliday. Just the way he delivers that.
Yeah, you look it.
And then right after the fight, when Wyatt Earp turns to Biehn and says, "I don't think I'll let you arrest us today, Biehn." That was just like, who said, like, "I don't think I'll let you arrest us today." Like, it was just so badass of a line.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Superman lets you put cuffs on him. It's like, yeah, it's more of a symbolic kind of thing.
And you, music lover, you are next. He's a freaking drunk piano player. You're so drunk, you're probably seeing double. I've got 2 guns, 1 for each of you.
The other, it's not exactly a quote in the sense, but just Wyatt getting up in the middle when they're surrounded at the creek and him just going, no, basically, and then going out and wading into the creek, getting shot at 5 times, the guy misses, and killing Curly Bill. I appreciate that because then when I watch, I think it's Revenge of the Sith, when Palpatine goes, no. Like, it reminds me of that. But I thought that was just great delivery of the line that, I thought Kurt Russell really does a great job. He was definitely the Scottie Pippen to Val Kilmer's Jordan in this one.
Another one that I just liked was I may have overstated the severity of my condition.
Then again, you might be the Antichrist.
Yeah.
That one, when he goes, "Oh, Johnny Tyler, I forgot you were here. You may go now."
You may go.
Leave the shotgun.
Leave that shotgun.
Oh, that was so great. What a power play.
And then when Billy Bob Thornton says, after he's, pulled the shotgun, ready to go at Wyatt Earp, but sees Doc Holliday, realizes they're friends, and realizes, oh my gosh, both of these men can kill me, he says, "Thank you," upon leaving his own shotgun there for Wyatt Earp. As in, thank you that you let me live.
Yeah, that was amazing. Actually, I realized that I skipped over myself for best scene. Bar bluffing between Doc Holliday and Ringo was another one that had so many good lines between Doc Holliday and Ringo. On that one, it's the one where the cup spinning takes place, and Brian's described it perfectly, but that was my best scene.
Awesome.
High school, I took Latin, and so I actually had learned at the time, I don't remember now, all of the Latin phrases, the back and forth between the two of them.
Yeah. So Brian, do you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
Let's do it.
So next time, we're going to go for the Coen brothers here. Option 1, No Country for Old Men, 2007. Violence and mayhem ensue after a hunter stumbles upon a drug deal gone wrong and more than $2 million in cash near the Rio Grande. Option 2, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, from 2000. In the Deep South during the 1930s, 3 escaped convicts search for a hidden treasure while a relentless lawman pursues them. And option 3, A Serious Man, from 2009. Larry Gopnik, a Midwestern physics teacher, watches his life unravel over multiple sudden incidents. Through seeking meaning and answers amidst his turmoils, he seems to keep sinking. So Brian, what does it be? No Country for Old Men, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or A Serious Man?
I think we're going to go with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. That's going to be a stirring talk about soundtrack.
Yeah, that's about that. See that's a more epic soundtrack that you'll go around singing for months, or at least weeks anyway after watching it. So yeah, good choice. I look forward to that one.
Still not better than Top Gun.
I don't know about that, but Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything you would like to plug?
No, but there's one shout out I wanted to give to a friend of mine from college. Back then, we were living together and we got HBO, and it was when HBO would have some movies on just constantly between HBO 1, 2, and 3, and it happened to be Tombstone. And after 4 days in a row of me watching Tombstone just constantly, he comes home and he goes, "Something else. You just have to put on something else. For today and for tomorrow, I just can't watch Tombstone again. I'm not saying you can't put it on in the future. I just need a day up. I just need 2 days away from Tombstone." So I'm really happy that ended up paying off and got to do this podcast. So, thank you to my buddy Josh for putting up with me back then on Tombstone. So now I got to talk about it so much here.
Fantastic. Really good choice there. And I now appreciate the song Doc Holiday by Volbeat a lot more thanks to this episode and watching this as well. So it's the moment of truth. On a 5-star scale, half-star intervals, Andrew, what would you rate this movie?
For me, this is definitely a 6 out of 5 stars. I realize that your system doesn't handle capable of that, but that's how much I love this movie. It is rewatchable. I've never sat down with somebody and had them watch this movie and then go, "That sucked." Anybody I know that's seen it is like, okay, yeah, that's a really good movie. So definitely 5 out of 5 stars for me.
Solid. Frye.
I'm giving it a 5. I love this movie. We've done maybe 3 movies so far in this podcast that are just easy rewatches for me. This is definitely one of them. This is a movie that got me into movies. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the movie that got me into movies, but it's definitely one of them.
I think we're in firm agreement here. As usual, you and I seem to see eye to eye, and we both love this movie. It's a fantastic movie. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, he really does quote Curly Bill a lot.
As for me, I'm going to give this movie 4 stars. I don't have I don't have the experience with it that you guys do, but I really enjoyed it. So this is in my top 5 Westerns. It's not my top Western. I'm still going to reserve that for Shane as my top Western, but it's in my top 5. And so maybe I like Westerns a little bit better now, thanks to this movie.
Well, if you do like this, other similar Westerns that I recommend highly are Young Guns and Young Guns 2.
Well, I will look forward to catching those at some point because I've not seen either of those. Westerns is one of my biggest genre gaps, so I will certainly have to check that out as well at some point. So thanks so much, though.
You're very welcome. I'll try to not hold that 4-star rating against you.
Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.
And thank you all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And as always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Bryan?
Fast is fine, but accuracy is everything. In a gunfight, you need to take your time in a hurry.